Hi YouTube, it's your IFBB Bikini Pro, Lisette Howard, and in today's fitness lifestyle hacks series, we're going to be talking about something that I have struggled with for a very long time, and I know that so many of you ladies struggle with the same thing. I have a lot of clients who are always reaching out to me, asking me questions specifically about this topic, and what I'm talking about is cellulite. So today we're going to learn a little bit about what it is, how it forms, and what are some of the things that you guys can do to either prevent it or help reduce the appearance of it in the future. For the last several years, I've been doing a lot of research on cellulite simply because it's something that I've struggled with basically since I was in my 20s. I started to read more and more about it, and I've learned that part of it is based on genetics. Even though it's not solely based on genetics, part of it is. So if you have a mom, an aunt, a grandmother who has it, then you're kind of already predisposed to suffering from cellulite. And even though it's not a medical condition, for those of you who have it, you know that it feels like you have a medical condition. So today we're going to talk about what it is and how does it form. Okay, so what is cellulite? Cellulite is basically when fat cells start to work their way up through connective tissue to try to reach the surface of the skin. So if you have your skin here subcutaneously, so right under it, you have a layer of connective tissue. Sometimes that tissue is kind of soft, it's a little bit weak, sometimes it loses its elasticity. And what happens is that the fatty tissue, so the accumulation of fat cells that's under the connective tissue, starts to worm and work its way up towards the surface of the skin. What happens is that those fat cells that are circular, as they work their way up, they start pulling down the connective tissue, creating that look of unevenness and lumpiness and like that cottage cheese look that all of us totally hate. But it's basically that. It's fat cells working their way up through and seeping themselves through the connective tissue, creating kind of space and divots between it and pulling that connective tissue down. And since it's so close to the surface of the skin, you start to see that texturizing and that unevenness in your skin surface. So the obvious thing would be, okay, if I get rid of fat cells, then I can get rid of the cellulite. But unfortunately, the body doesn't really work that way. So the way that the body works is that we're born with a set number of fat cells. And basically a fat cell, which is also known as an adipose cell, is a cell that's comprised of a droplet of fat. And that droplet makes up the majority of the size of that cell. So it's like about 85% of that cell is a droplet of fat. The body, the way that it works is that you have a set number of fat cells that you have and you generate until the point that you hit puberty. Past puberty, there's only two ways that you can change the number of fat cells you have. The first way is by gaining an obscene amount of weight very quickly. And the second way is if you do liposuction and you physically remove the adipose tissue, the fat cells from the body. Other than that, you have a set number of fat cells. And people think, well, as you get older and you gain weight, you're getting more and more fat cells. And it's just not that way. What happens is that the set number of fat cells you have just get bigger. They get larger, they get more engorged. That droplet of fat in there just starts to expand and gets bigger. So those cells volumize, they take up more space. So naturally you think if those fat cells are getting bigger, the reason why you see more and more unevenness in the skin is because those larger fat cells are moving their way up to the surface of the skin. So they're pushing their way through that connective tissue. The larger the fat cells, the larger the space between the strands of connective tissue. And that's kind of the way that it works. So for every 10% of men that suffer from cellulite, 90% of women suffer from cellulite. So there's a lot of different factors that have to do with why women have it much more than men do. And it's basically due to hormones, the elasticity of the skin. It also has to do with where our bodies store fat, because it does store them differently than men. Okay, so why is it that on women we can see cellulite more so and carry more cellulite more so than men do? And it basically has to do with where our bodies store fat, like where we store that fatty tissue, that adipose tissue. And in us ladies, it's mostly in our hips, our thighs, our lower back, and on some of us, even in the back of our arms. And really the appearance of cellulite has a lot to do with the connective tissue itself. There's three big factors that affect that connective tissue. The first one being circulation and blood flow. Areas like our saddlebags, the back of our arms, our lower back, you don't really get a lot of circulation there or a lot of blood flow. And that's one of the things that kind of really weaken that connective tissue, allowing those fat cells to kind of work their way up. Another factor has to do with muscle density. So unfortunately, if you don't have any sort of muscle tone or any sort of volume in those muscles, you don't have a lot of muscle, there's nothing pressing itself up against that connective tissue to keep it tight and keep it strong. So naturally, the more muscle density you have and the more you kind of train, resistance train your body and put on a little bit more muscle, the stronger that connective tissue gets, the less you have the appearance of unevenness. And then the last factor has to do with our hormones. Unfortunately, as we get older, our bodies produce less estrogen. And estrogen is important for keeping the body's like elasticity, for keeping that connective tissue youthful, strong, and really elastic. And what happens is that as our estrogen levels start to drop, that connective tissue starts to weaken and becomes a little bit more flaccid, allowing those fat cells to kind of work their way up and move their way up towards the surface of the skin, really creating that uneven texture on the surface. As I was doing more research about cellulite, there was a study that I came up on that I was reading, and it took a group of women and it had them do for 3 times a week 30 minutes of aerobic exercise. So they were basically doing 30 minutes of cardio exercise 3 times a week for 8 weeks. In those 8 weeks, those women lost 4 pounds. They didn't see any change in the unevenness. They still had the same amount of cellulite, and they also didn't put on any muscle. Then they did another study where instead of doing 30 minutes of cardio 3 times a week, they did 15 minutes of cardio and 15 minutes of resistance training. So they did weight training for 15 minutes for the same 8 weeks. In those 8 weeks, those women lost 10 pounds. They put on 2 pounds of lean muscle mass, and they saw a significant difference in the amount of cellulite and the appearance of cellulite that they had in the back of their legs. All right, so now that we know what cellulite is and how it forms, what are some of the things that you guys can do to help reduce the appearance of it? And I say that because unfortunately, it's not something that you can 100% get rid of. So none of those magical topical creams, they don't work. Trust me, I've tried them, I've researched them. They just don't work because the skin and the body doesn't work that way. And unfortunately for so many of us, and I include myself because I suffer from it, is that cellulite does not discriminate. You can be overweight, you can be thin, you can be athletic, you can be a little bit thicker, curvier, whatever ethnicity you are. Unfortunately, cellulite happens. And if you're genetically predisposed to it, especially like I am, it's something that's very difficult to struggle with because even though you can eat clean and you can, obviously exercise and increase that muscle density and reduce the size of those fat cells, some of it is still going to be there. But there are definitely some things that you guys can do to kind of reduce the appearance of it. And first and foremost is circulation. Bringing back the blood flow to those specific areas like the saddlebags, the lower back, the hips, the back of the arms. Bringing some circulation to that area through, endermology or maybe doing some laser treatments will help. Now, it's something that you have to be very consistent with. And I can tell you because I've tried it myself. I've done the cellulite massages before, like the reductive massages, and they definitely work, but it's not magic. I've had to do several, and I would say probably like 6 to 8 before I saw a real decrease in the appearance of that skin. The way that it works is that they go in there and they start breaking up that adipose tissue, that fatty tissue. They start strengthening and bringing back elasticity to the connective tissue. And the stronger that connective tissue is, the less likely those fat cells will work their way up towards the surface of the skin, bringing down the connective tissue. So it's worked for me. When I haven't done it, that cellulite comes right back. So it's something that you have to be consistent with it. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, those creams, and those topical ointments and oils, they don't really work. Mostly what they do is maybe hydrate the skin, and you'll see for a couple of days, maybe it looks a little bit less uneven, but it's not something that has like a long-term effect in any sort of way. The last thing you guys can try is a laser treatment. I haven't tried them myself, but I've read a lot about them. And there's just definitely some good LED laser treatments that definitely claim to help reduce the appearance of the cellulite. I would say get online, read some of the reviews because I definitely haven't tried them myself. I'm definitely willing to, but I do know that some of them work. They're a little bit expensive. They definitely are costly, and you're gonna have to do probably 8 to 10 before you see some real results, but they're worth a try. And if not, I would say obviously focus on the basics, the things that you guys can really start working on, which is shrinking those fat cells, hydrating your body, eating clean, putting on a little bit of that muscle tone, and circulating. So stretching, circulating your body. You guys can also make sure that you keep your body hydrated by eating foods that are filled with water, that are anti-inflammatory, like cucumbers and watermelon, peppers. They have a lot of water. 90% of the content of those fruits and vegetables are water. So they help not only bring down the inflammation of the body, but they definitely help keep you hydrated, which is a big factor in making sure that those fat cells don't stay too large and don't get bigger than they already are. Unfortunately, liposuction does not get rid of cellulite. I've had a lot of friends who have suffered from a lot of cellulite. They've done liposuction, and even though they've reduced their physical size, they still have that unevenness. And based on everything that I've read, and just based on my friends, firsthand accounts, I can tell you guys that unfortunately, liposuction doesn't work for that. I wish we could take a magic pill and just get rid of it, because I absolutely hate it. But there's definitely some of the things you guys can be doing. Liposuction unfortunately doesn't work. I hope you guys have liked this video. I hope you've learned something. I hope I've been able to explain the way that cellulite works and some of the things that you guys can do to help prevent it and help reduce it in some ways. But if you guys want a good structured program to help you guys lose weight, put on some muscle, actually get the body that you guys really want, and reduce some of the appearance of cellulite, then please visit my website, lisettehoward.com. You guys can click the link above. I have my transformation programs on there. I also have my nutritional programs where I work with you guys one-on-one, creating the perfect program to help you guys accelerate your fat loss and decrease that BMI. So head on over to lisettehoward.com. You guys can also find me on social media on Instagram and Facebook under LisetteHoward_fitness. And that's pretty much it. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and take care. Ciao, guys.